So today we have Lisa
Ossian.
Ossian, okay. And you are running for which position?
I'm running for the at-large city council position. So it doesn't sound like a very glamorous title, but it is one of the council members that represents the entire city versus one of the 4 wards.
Okay. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, maybe some of your background and family, if you like?
Okay, and that. So born and raised in Iowa, as they say. I was born in Ames and was there when my dad went back to college, and then he was a park ranger, so we lived in several parks in Iowa and that. So that's one of the things I've really liked when I moved to Oskaloosa 3 years ago. It's just the green spaces, and it's just such a pretty, nice, Iowa town and that. As far as my education, I have 2 degrees from Iowa State, so I have a bachelor's in English, and then I have a doctorate in agricultural history and rural studies and that. So I've spent a lot of time studying small town, rural issues and things like that. So my husband, Vince Payne, he works for Windsor Windows in Norwalk. So he has a bit of a commute, but he says it's worth it, here in Oskaloosa, and that he's fallen in love with the town as well. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So what made you decide that you wanted to be a city council member for Oskaloosa?
Like I said, I'm a historian in that I've taught community college for 30 years. So teaching government, to all of our, sometimes young, sometimes not. My students ranged in age from 16 to 90 and that. But I've always been interested in the local government and what it can do, should do, maybe doesn't do, and that. And so as a historian as well, I think we need to pay more attention to our local government. People get all upset about Washington, but if you're a moderate to lower income person, most of your tax dollars, your property tax, your sales tax, other things are at the local level, and those decisions are made by your school board, your city council, and your county supervisors and that. So you want good, conscientious people in those jobs. And I've just always been really interested in kind of community planning and things you can do. Just as I came here today, I could see the urban park and the kids out, playing with the skateboards, and it was a nice touch for Oskaloosa. So.
Well, you kind of touched on that planning.
Okay.
I know they're looking at, building out the comprehensive plan that will help direct Oskaloosa for the next 20 years. But beyond that, there's some personnel issues too. I mean, it's city manager.
Right.
I don't know how much you guys will be involved with that, if that'll be decided before, but I'm sure there's some
Okay.
conversation maybe with you guys about that.
Right.
We have a public works director, I think maybe a fire chief. So I mean, there'll be some items of discussion. How do you hope to tackle all of that? Particularly being a junior city council member, so to speak. So
well, one is to talk with some of the former city council members. I just talked to Scotty yesterday, and she was very helpful and said, if you need any advice or any kind of, the learning curve, for that. So I pride myself on working really well with different groups of people. Again, teaching at a community college, I've been on all sorts of boards and committees and that. And so you realize, you've got to listen to other people. As Scotty said, we would really talk out some issues and that for Oskaloosa, but we'd come to some understanding, and we'd continue to work with each other. And she said that was very, very important. So I'd like to continue that. I'm good with numbers, and that historians sometimes rattle off a lot of numbers, and that's why people kind of hate that. But I think that's good, for a city council member. I like looking at budgets and where the money's going and things like that. So
the comprehensive plan is like a once every 2 decades sort of document that's put together. What kinds of things would you like to see Oskaloosa kind of point towards in the next decade, 2 decades?
Well, I think we could grow back some more. We've lost a lot of population in the last 100 years. We used to be a really thriving coal mining center. Well, coal mining is no longer, and that. But what are the other things that Oskaloosa could offer, in this new century, and that? So, getting some more people here. We've got a really good sort of infrastructure as far as the houses, because we were once a prosperous place. So I think we could do a lot more with renovation of properties and that. We're in a great location, we're right in between Des Moines and Iowa City. And so with the changing nature of work since the pandemic, people can work from home and that. So if a place has a number of things to offer for a family, a couple, an older person, we've got a great school, we've got a great county hospital, and that we've got the amenities, like a bike trail and a coffee shop and, some nice parks and a good Y that's being built and that. So those are the kinds of things people think about. I know we did when we were making a decision about where to live. So.
Okay, so those are some of the real positives that are going on here. Are you seeing some things that you go, I'd like to get in there and offer my own opinion? Maybe these have been a problem.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's the violence. I've done some historical work on rural violence and that, what happened, finding Xavier's body, recently and that. And just some other things going on, that you sort of hear about. I know when we were first thinking about moving here, there had been a shooting, a murder, at one of the gas stations, and that was of concern. There's been some other things too. I know there's been some problems with drugs. I don't know specifics and that, but there was that other story too. So there's a dark side to any community, any family, and that. And I think it's best not to hide from it or pretend that doesn't exist, and to see if there's ways that different groups can work together, on that. Oskaloosa has a lot of churches, so there are some very concerned people in this town, and that. So anyway, so that would be something, something to think about, and not ignore. I don't think you should ignore, problems in society. They don't just go away.
So I was going to say, one of the conversations that happens often is Oskaloosa is not developing or growing at the rate that maybe if some of our neighbors are, such as Pella, Grinnell, those kinds of similar sized communities. Right. What do you think is the problem? Is there a problem? And how would we fix that if there is?
Yeah. Well, my daughter, who is 21, she lived here this summer. She was looking around. She goes, "There's so many great possibilities in this town, And she says, Oskaloosa needs to just say, go for it. And so, in not such a simplistic way, we need a little bit of a confidence, that, hey, we have a lot of things to be proud of. We're building. We can do these things, because that when you go to Grinnell and Pella, they have a confidence level. And people will follow that, okay? And I think it's maybe pulling together some other things that are going on in the county, But we've got some really unique things. The whole Christmas lighting parade is one, and we've got the Sweet Corn Serenade, and we've got the art center that's doing things. And so I think we need to just be a little more proud, which is not a bad trait, and do a little bit more to promote it and to partner, in making that happen. But I think Oskaloosa's got all sorts of potential. I wouldn't have moved here if I didn't believe so.
Well, let's ask that. So when you were looking for a home, what really caught your eye? What made you stop at Oskaloosa?
Well, we found a beautiful Victorian. We've been looking. Honestly, we had been looking at Grinnell, at Pella. The housing was a little bit more expensive, and so we were trying to break out of that central Iowa, and I was a little bit more free in where I could, live and work and that. And then my husband couple houses caught his eye in Oskaloosa. It's like, oh, okay, we'll drive down here, we'll see, and it's funny. We had the same reaction that my new neighbor did. They just came to Oskaloosa. He needed his birth certificate at the county square, at the courthouse. And my neighbor was saying he got out. He goes, I love this town. This is like really. So they just bought a house. And sometimes, it's as simple as that. You just have a really nice reaction. Like, this is a good small town. I think we could make it work here.
So it's not been a secret that the city of Oskaloosa and Mahaska County don't always see eye to eye.
Yes.
How would you work on building that relationship for the betterment of everybody, not just in Oskaloosa, but Mahaska County?
Yeah. Well, for example, I was at Hy-Vee on Friday, and I was raising funds for the Lions Club, and I was with a friend of mine, and she's the one who got me talked into that. And so, project for hearing and learning, or hearing and vision, and that. And my former competitor for the county supervisors walked in the door, but we were very cordial to each other, and he was asking, what projects were going on, and he talked about his knee surgery, and I talked about, this and that. So I think we have to stop seeing it so much as an adversary, like everybody in their lives has things going on, okay? We all want, we would hope, the better for the community. And to really just sort of sit down and talk through some of those things and really negotiate. We do a lot of, us versus them, in today's political world, and that doesn't get anybody anywhere. And that, especially if we're a smaller rural county, we only have so many dollars to work with. We got to make those dollars count, and we can't spend it fighting each other or fighting projects and that.
And public safety is another one that, and you kind of touched on that with your concern over some of the historical.
Right, yeah.
Public safety is one of the primary focuses of any local government. What would be your plans with public safety here locally? Would you reevaluate it? What kinds of things? I mean, especially with a new fire chief at some point in time.
Right, exactly. I know, when I was campaigning for the county, getting to see the sheriff and then his deputies, and I was impressed how they would be at local meetings, at the city council meetings, and that. I've been very impressed. I live a couple blocks from the cemetery and by the hospital, so we're kind of in that area. And so just the other day, I see the police car come swinging up, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? But they were blocking traffic so that the procession could go by for the funeral. And it was just sometimes little things that matter. But I noticed the young woman, the police officer, she stood with her hand like this the entire procession. And I just thought, we need, my dad was in law enforcement as a park officer, so I grew up, with that. He'd come home and put the gun on the table, and, you knew not to touch it. There was a respectful there. But Dad didn't have a partner, and he had a huge jurisdiction, and rural areas can be really violent, and so he kind of taught us those things too. You can talk down a lot, just by getting to know somebody and getting a little bit of a story, and you don't come in guns blazing and that. So I think it'll be really good, and I believe the police department and the fire department's been doing that. Is getting out in the community, letting people know that they're there, that there's a trust factor. They're looking out for you. Even sometimes when you don't like it, like when my 20-year-old got stopped because she didn't have her seatbelt on, and she was really upset. Like, hey, you should have had your seatbelt on. And I'm kind of glad the local police were watching, because I also know if something's going on, if my house is getting robbed, they're also going to be available as well, and so we've had some terrific fires, I've heard, in Oskaloosa. All towns' history is just full of those big fires, so you want fire departments to have the best equipment, the really good training. You want to coordinate with a lot of the other communities. I know when I was in New Sharon, they have a very progressive, when I was campaigning, they have a very progressive fire department there, and doing some other work too. So, in a town this size, you want to be able to call in reinforcements, for that.
Okay. Well, we're getting to the last of my
Okay.
questions I had in my mind.
Okay.
But I want to open the floor up to you so you can share maybe some thoughts that,
Okay.
you know, were important for you that I haven't touched upon.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say too, I've been very interested in the school board and meeting the candidates and that. I think, you know, for city council members, we have to be very cognizant of what's important in the community. A school is very important, especially in these smaller communities. If the school goes, the town often goes. And we don't realize the economic importance, let alone, you know, the obvious educational importance a school has in that. And getting the business, you know, I've been impressed with like the facade project. You know, it sounds surface, pardon the pun, but you know, it's making the square just more inviting, and that's the kind of thing that leads, you know, to better business. And that I think a lot of cooperation between our other, you know, the county supervisors and the city council, and doing those kinds of projects that are good for the entire health, you know. The community is going to be important, and just the other things too. You know, we've got a lot of things really started, like the urban park. I'd like to see more done with that. You know, and that because you want to keep the youth, you know, active and happy, and you know,
Right.
Otherwise you get problems. You know, and so I just think it's a really good chance to be much more proactive with a lot of things versus trying to clean up messes. So,
Well, we appreciate your time. So,
Okay, thank
so
you.
for everybody, again, your name is?
my name's Lisa Ossian, and it's spelled Ossian, and hopefully you look forward to your vote and serving you for the next 4 years.
In the at-large position.
Yes, in the at-large city council position. So,
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.